All right, you're going to get in groups, small groups, no more than 4 in your group. Okay?
Wow.
4?
Okay.
You want more?
4's fine.
4 might be pushing it. Yes, ma'am?
Spouse with that group or no?
I don't care.
You can decide.
You may not. Get in groups of 4, and then we're going to give you a question, but we want you to get in your groups first.
3 or 4?
So you're 4, whatever works. Whatever works. Okay, so your question tonight is, because we're going to go with this in a little bit, is discuss in your group your best parenting tips. If you were going to tell Chelsea over there and Corey, here's what you need to know. What would be your best? What you feel like have been like, these are my nuggets I live by. Go.
And if you don't have kids yet, then what's the best tip you've heard?
Okay. So what we'd like to do now is hear some of these. Let's hear some of these tips that we've talked about, because we're going to talk in a little bit about, we're going to move on. We finished, we stopped. We didn't finish. We stopped last week with the 2-year-olds. We're going to pick up with the 2-year-olds and move all the way through the teens tonight. That's our goal. And in doing so, we're going to do a few of these things too. So we'd like to hear what you think are some of the things that you've been successful at, some good tips. Go. Jump in.
I think mine is just being in kitchen and my son's life and having an open communication. Nothing is off limits.
Awesome.
Yes.
So, intentional, open communication. No subjects off limits.
Exactly.
Definitely.
I just said you have to treat them as individuals. You cannot have one set of rules, one set of expectations. Like, I have 5 sets of rules, and 5 sets of expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, even as far as discipline, as far as what I expect their grades to be, like their performance level, whatever.
And that goes back to when we talked about at the beginning, personality, birth order, expectations and gender, all that plays a part in that very thing. Excellent. What else?
Follow through. Mean what you do. What you mean. Do what you say you're going to do.
Follow through.
Consistency.
Right. Don't threaten. Don't do any good to threaten, because they catch on really quick. Oh, they don't mean that.
Yeah.
Okay? What else?
Pick your battles.
Pick your battles.
Excellent.
You shouldn't fight every single battle. You'll be exhausted and they will be too. Others? Okay, come on. She wasn't the only one in that group. Come on. Miss Kale. You got some great kiddos.
I said don't discipline in anger. Take some deep breaths and think about it before you decide on the punishment if you're really angry about something. And just make sure that that's really the appropriate discipline for, because sometimes they can make you so mad.
Yeah.
And you just, sometimes you like, sometimes you don't want to make it work on yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that it helps the kids when you say,
I gotta take some.
I'm putting me in timeout.
I'm gonna think about it.
I'm too tired and I'm too angry and I need a timeout. And I'm going to go think about this. Well, first of all, that kind of makes... What's she thinking about? How bad is this going to be? That's okay. Kevin Lehman really stresses that in a new kid by Friday. That's a powerful tool you have. But it also really helps you, because you really only want to discipline in a way that they grow from it, not just out of anger. That's punishment. That's different. Okay? Anything else? sage wisdom over there from Taylor?
I think it kind of goes with what Mary was saying, intentional, but like, if they're not listening to you, take some time, and then like, when you're doing another activity, like shooting the ball or going fishing or whatever, then you can talk to them about stuff, and it's the whole adage of you think we're just fishing, but we're not, you know, and
Yeah.
that seems to work with my boys a lot, where they don't want to hear me bark at them, but if we're doing practice, we can talk about anything.
Right, right. I think that,
But being intentional about stuff like that.
and you have to make that a plan, because you can go fishing, just go fishing.
Right.
You have to make it a part of it. One of the things I appreciate about Alan's upbringing is listening to him talk about his dad using those kinds of opportunities to train him to be a good Christian man. I love hearing those stories, because that's not just do as I say or you'll be punished for it. He instilled within him character along with the discipline, and I love that.
I don't remember anything my dad told me when I was in trouble. I remember lots and lots of lectures that ended with being spanked, and I just looked forward to getting spanked, so the lecture was over with. But I don't remember anything he said. But I remember a whole lot that my dad said when we was out walking through the woods, when we was hunting, when we were fishing, sometimes just driving down the road. He had something he liked doing that he worked lots of hours. So if he came home and my mom needed him to go to the grocery store for something, he took either me or my brother with him. He is always looking for time to have extra time with me or my brother. And those were some of the richest training times. We'd just be walking down the aisles of the store and he'd talk about things, and I'd remember that. And I still remember a lot of that. So that's the time when you parent. The disciplining and telling them what they did wrong. They may be smarter than I was, but I figure most of your kids are going to treat your great discipline the same way I treated my dad's, which is, totally ignore it, just try to survive, go on to the next day. Especially since a lot of the times when I got in trouble, I knew I was going to get in trouble before I did whatever I did, and I'd already figured out, can I handle it? And I remember one time when my brother and I were playing in the water when we weren't supposed to, and we knew when we got back to the house, we was going to get spanked. And we discussed how many licks did we think my mom was going to spank us with, and would she tell her dad? And then we decided, well, we get muddy too. I mean, after thinking it through, not just wet, we could also get muddy, and we just had a wonderful time. And then she beat us when we got home, and that made her happy. So, kids do things like that.
They do. They do. They calculate it out. Is this worth it?
Well, I'll tell a perfect example of a little moment or talking time happened today. Jackson ended up saying that a boy ended up punching him in the face and pushed him out the school bus. And I'm like, okay. And so we were sitting in the living room, already had PBS Kids on, and so of course, it was doing this, and I couldn't really get the story or something like that. And I says, all right, come on. And he said, come with me. And well, immediately he thought he was in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I took him by the hand and we went out in the garage, and I went ahead and opened my tailgate. And then he's never seen me do this, but I hit the little button and the step pops out of the tailgate. And he was like, wow, I didn't know that was there. So he stepped up there, and so we literally would sit on my tailgate at the garage outside, no TV going on, and he scooted right up there, and he just started telling me this whole story all the way from the beginning to the end. And I was like, well, okay, I think we need to talk to Miss Jemima tomorrow to figure out really what's going on with this other boy. And then by that time, Amanda come driving up, and he was like like this to her,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
like
'cause
that,
you're
and then
coming
finally,
Yeah.
she pulls up and I says, no, you can go in the park. She thought I was doing something in the garage,
Yeah.
and so he was so excited about being able to sit there and tell the story that he actually says, Mama, there's enough room up here for you. Made her sit down on the tailgate, and he told this whole story again. I'm talking about, I never get such a straight story. I've
Yeah.
never got it. So now I think that could be one of my little routines about saying, if we need to talk, we're going to go sit on the tailgate.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I tell you what, is that sitting on the tailgate, that means you care to do this with him, and it impacts him so greatly. That is your time. And son, you need to be really kind to. That's that time you impart that, because he's listening. Because you have his attention, and that is a learning moment that you couldn't manipulate it and have it turn out like that. So, excellent. Excellent. Okay, so we stopped last week with 2-year-olds when Alan was talking on his little soapbox about, give them some room and some space and let them be 2-year-olds and let them be independent and don't take it so personal.
yeah, don't get ego involved. It's not you against the 2-year-old. That's kind of ridiculous. Yeah, let the 2-year-old be 2. Don't take it personal. Okay, then they turn 3. And they're a lot smarter at 3 than they are at 2. And so it feels much more intentional when they do things that you thought you'd train them out of. But one of the survival tips for dealing with a 3-year-old, pick one thing per week that you're going to parent them on. One thing. Don't work on everything. There's always plenty of things to work on. Pick the one thing you most want to work on that week. Work on it for a week. If at the end of the week they don't have it done, well, it's possible that they're not developmentally ready to learn whatever it is you're trying to train them. It's possible that you're not in a good place to train them at that point. So for the next week, pick something else. And don't go picking 3 or 4 or 10 or 12 things. You wear yourself out, you wear the poor child out. Work on one thing. One of the things that I learned after my kids were half grown, and I wished I'd known this when they were a lot younger. If they do something inappropriate, I do not have to correct it at that moment. Because they're either going to do it again, which might be a better moment. Maybe I'm calmer. Maybe I'm already angry about something. That's not a good time to discipline my children. Maybe we're in a more private place. Maybe they're in a better place. Maybe they're not worn out or hungry or whatever is complicating what's going on with them. So either they're going to do it again when I might have a better opportunity to train them, or they learn from doing it wrong the first time. See, they're not totally dependent upon you to teach them what's right. Certain actions teach them. If they burn themselves, they have learned. Don't do that anymore. You don't have to discipline them on that. They have learned it. So if they don't ever do it again, you didn't need to waste your time or their time trying to parent them out of it. So you don't have to fix everything at the time it happens. Pick one thing, work on that for a week, and then pick something else and work on that for a week, and then pick something else.
Now, I will add, that age range of 2.5, 3 to 5, don't wait too long, because they have a very short attention span. So you may not do it right that moment, but if it happens again fairly soon, you need to go handle it. If it doesn't ever happen again, you don't have to handle it. They did. They figured it out. You move on. It saves you and them both. But in that range, that's what I want you to remember, is that their attention span is short. It grows tremendously. Now, I mean, from the time they're born until they're 5, it is unbelievable how much their brain absorbs and grows. When you think about all they accomplish as a child in the first 3 years, from completely helpless to walking, talking, going to the bathroom hopefully on their own or getting really close to that. They can start putting on their own clothes. They might be putting on their own shoes. By the time they're 3, they've accomplished so much. And by the time they're ready for kindergarten at 5, like, they look like little adults almost. At no other point in their development will they grow exponentially the way they do from birth to 5 years.
Actually, people that study human development maintain that human beings learn over half of everything you will learn over your entire lifespan in your first 2 years. Over half. So be sensitive to how much they're learning. You don't want to throw a whole lot of extra on top of it.
Okay, so in that, but they're absorbing everything, so this is a great time to be giving them all those things you're giving up, like the beginning of manners, the beginning of how to treat each other kindly, all those moral start that you want to give them. That's when you give it to them. You reinforce it after that. But that's when you start that feeding. That's why we had our babies in Bible class from 10 days on. They were here. Well, they weren't here. We weren't here. We were somewhere else.
But they
were in Bible class. They were at church. And you go into Miss Carol's Bible class, and those babies are patting their Bibles, and they're loving on their Bibles, and they're learning about Jesus and about love. Do they know all that you know? No, maybe. I don't know. Make an assumption here. But they're learning, and that's what you want. You want them in that very rich learning environment. So, consequently, discipline needs to look different for that age range, especially 3 to 5, because it's like Alan said about touching something hot and burning yourself. Everything they do is an experience. Life is such an adventure for a 3 to 5-year-old. I mean, they're just taking it all in with all of their senses and trying to file it away in that filing cabinet in their brain and making sense of all of that. So, a better discipline pattern for them is, yes, there are some things that are just absolutes. No, you can't run out in the street, you're going to get killed. And I don't want you to experience that, because that's a little harsh, right? Okay, but there are those things. They go out. Every one of my kids, at one point or another, tried to eat dirt. God made dirt. Dirt don't hurt. It didn't kill any of them, but you know what? They weren't too crazy about doing that again. Learning is how, everything they do, they're learning. So you want to talk to them about that, how that feel. Would you do that again? You're starting the foundation of one of the greatest tools you give your kids. And that is teaching them about choice. About learning that they can make a choice. I know 3-year-olds who have an opinion about what they want to wear. And it's not necessarily your opinion. They are opinionated. Some kids don't like the way clothes feel, certain clothes. They don't want that. They like that color. They want to wear those shoes, those boots, those fuzzy boots in July, because they like them. They feel good. They're learning these things, so they have to learn the consequence of, okay, let them wear those really hot boots in July. And they're going to find out, My feet are hot. I don't like the way they feel choice. You start them young and you start working through those years. By the time they start kindergarten and a teacher says, here are the rules, here are the rewards, smiley faces, treasure box, da da da, here are the consequences, they know what that means. Because they've had their rewards and they've had their consequences of the choices that you allowed them in a safe environment to make. You've started a foundation that really grows them.
Now, kids' brains grow at different rates, but their brains grow. And as they grow, they develop the ability to think in more complete ways. But you need to be sensitive to the fact that a 3-year-old who is now becoming verbal and who has learned a favorite word, why, does not have the cognitive ability to figure out why. That's why they keep saying why, because your answers don't make sense to them. And then parents get pulled into the trap of thinking, oh, my child can reason. And then when they try to discipline, they explain why you should do this. And they give them these adult type reasons for why you should do that. Keep them simple. That's not nice. You know, you wouldn't like it if they did it to you. Those nice, simple reasons like that. Matter of fact, in studying how people develop the ability to do the right thing, we've discovered that as people develop, the first thing they're able to master is, I have to do the right thing or I get in trouble. Up till about 3 years of age, that's why people do the right thing. Now, they might do it to make mama happy. But a lot of that is still, they don't want to get in trouble. That's the primary motivation. Somewhere around 3 years of age, for most children, between 3 and 4, they cognitively have the ability to learn to do the right thing because that's the nice thing to do. It's a good thing. And they develop this sense of good things versus not good things. And if they choose to be good, then they will do the good things. But what makes a good thing for them is they get smiles, they get kind words, people like them. So it's a reward type of thing. So early on, it's a punishment type of thing. They don't want to get in trouble. And then up until about kindergarten age, what drives them is the reward. Now they're still driven by punishment, but they are more driven by reward. Then you get up around kindergarten age, about 5 years of age, maybe 6, they become more social. Now they will do the right thing because they don't want the other kids thinking badly of them, or they don't want their kindergarten teacher thinking badly of them. So it's kind of like they were back at 2 and 3. They don't want to get in trouble. And then as they get to older elementary age, 3rd through about 5th grade, they will tend to want to do the right thing because at this point, the other kids like them. So they don't, it's not just the negative, I don't want them to not like me, it's I want them to like me.
Peer pressure.
Yeah, so you're driven more by the positive. And people flip back and forth, but it's always negative driven first for a few years, then positive driven of the same thing. But you're not going to have kids starting to do things because, well, Jesus Christ died for you and he loves you and now he wants you to do this for him. They can repeat that back to you, but they don't get it. Their brain does not work that way when they're children. But as adults, we will think they do because they can say it back to us. It's up around 11, 12, 13 when the brain really opens up and expands and the kids get lost in their own head. That's when they begin to develop the ability to have really abstract reasoning. And a lot of the things we've been trying to tell them since they were 3 on why they should do things actually start working around 13.
Okay, don't get too far ahead. So that next group we call the elementary years. Alan and I, 6 to 10, 6 to 11, somewhere in there, We personally call that the golden years.
Yeah.
That's the good time. Lots of good things are going on. They're becoming more independent. They can't go to the bathroom on their own. They can put their clothes on. They can tell you when they hurt. They can tell you when they are happy. They can talk to you. They start having complete sentences as a rule. They enjoy, I say as a rule because, some kids, they just mutter anyway. But they are developing into just these really cool little people. Their personalities start really expanding. They're getting into that whole idea of social. They start having real opinions about themselves. First grader, I've taught first through sixth grade. First graders, I call them the police. That's the police here. The rules are this, and everybody should do the rules. They're not doing the rules. They cut in line. There's always at least one police chief in every first grade class. And then that police chief will have their subordinates that keep everybody in line. And if anybody messes up, they're going to talk because they're figuring out that social order of right and wrong. This works, this doesn't, and if you keep messing up, the whole class misses recess. And that is not fair. First, second grade, they're really getting into the whole idea of what it means to be honest and truthful or deceitful. And all these pieces start falling into place, all these little things they're learning, and so they start testing it. What does it look like? What happens? What happens if I get caught doing something wrong? Like sneaking a cookie. Or writing on the refrigerator with a permanent marker. Or, what happens when those things, am I going to get in trouble? What's my punishment? Is it worth it? They start figuring these things out. And so this is just this age. But as a rule, they kind of settle. They're a little bit easier. They don't demand all of your attention. They can play independently. They can dress themselves. You can tell them on Saturday morning, I'm sleeping late, you get your own cereal, and they can do that. Life gets a little bit easier. And also, their bodies have they're growing. Do you know, we have a doctor in the room, so I'm always intimidated when I start talking about stuff like this, but do you know that the greatest majority of the growth a child has is while they're sleeping? You're having trouble putting them to bed? Ask them, do you want to be that small the rest of your life? Because if you don't go to sleep, your body can't shut down and do its thing and grow. I'm just saying, you want to grow, you want to be 2'3", but they're growing. Those are those kinds of things, but as they grow, it's proportional to their behavior. They just mellow out a tad. It'll change.
Yeah, I think they're going to come back about 13 and remind you of that.
Yeah, they are.
They lose their minds.
Yeah. But in this time period, you're continuing the choice. You're teaching them now, if you eat all of the cookies tonight, you won't have any tomorrow afternoon when you get home. They'll just all be gone. And you're going to be really sad that there's not any cookies left. But if you eat them all, okay. Okay, and then tomorrow, where's the cookies? You ate them all, but did you get more? No, I didn't need to get more. We had enough, but you ate it. Consequence. This is what happens. Learning self-discipline and structure and self-control. This is all of that time period. And they're going to get it. And as long as you're allowing them the opportunity to mess up, to make a choice and mess up, this is the time to do it, because most of their mess ups they're not major life decisions like they might be at 15 and 16. Let them try. and let them see what it feels like so they can then go, oh, I don't like how that happened. Yeah, how could you do that differently next time? See, and that's what we were talking about even with the 2-year-old. I don't take it personal. I didn't make that choice. That choice, your decision on that choice is your problem. You have to figure out what you're going to do different next time.
There was some interesting research a few years ago on a concept called emotional IQ. The idea that children at some point develop this ability to make decisions based upon controlling their own emotions. And the more they control their emotions, the more they end up controlling their life. Now, looking at the research, it looked to me just like we're talking about basic self-control. And we're going to talk about that more in depth next week. But one of the things they used to test for this eventually turned out to be one of the things you could use to train for this. They would take kids, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old, they were trying to figure out where this would start at. And they would set them in this room, and they would put 5 M&Ms in front of them. And they'd say, I'm going to leave the room. When I do, you can eat the M&Ms, or you can not eat the M&Ms. And if you don't eat the M&Ms, when I come back in a few minutes, I will give you 5 more. Now, most 3-year-olds immediately ate the M&Ms. Most 4-year-olds, over the next few minutes, would eat the M&Ms. And a lot of the study was looking at how did they try to keep themselves from eating the M&Ms. And one of the most common things were a 4-year-old would just turn and look elsewhere. They would not even look at them. And that let them not eat them. By 5, many kids were able to just sit and wait because they're developing this ability to want to get more by controlling themselves now. And children at 6 who did not have this ability, the researchers found they had all kinds of behavioral problems throughout their life. So an important skill for a child is to have the ability to control self, to deny self what would be a natural want long enough to get something better. And then they found that we can actually start training a 3-year-old who's really not supposed to necessarily know how to do that by doing this maybe every day. Take 5 minutes. Probably a 3-year-old, 3 minutes would be long enough. Give them 5 M&Ms. And if they ever have an M&M left when you come back, you match it. Oh, they got 2, and you make a big deal out of it. And after a few days, they get where they can not eat as many. And then after a few weeks, they don't eat any of them because they want to double their M&Ms. And so you're teaching this skill of emotional control. But a lot of this still comes back to what are they cognitively and emotionally able to do.
I can't help but think of Shannon. Our Shannon was a talker. She's still a talker. But we had her down to, Shannon, you just need to be quiet for 5 minutes. She could do it. By the time she was about 8, she could not talk, almost to the second. She knew what 5 minutes felt like to her because it was eternity. But she knew what it felt like. She called me the other day, she goes, Mom, how on earth did you train me to do that? Because Jax never shuts up. And I said, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work. And you have to train yourself. You have to figure these things. It's like, I was good at that. I know I was good at that. You weren't good at that. It took a lot of self-control to get there. Okay, our time. We're trying to keep an eye on our time. We really,
got 3 minutes.
yeah. So,
Preteens.
preteen teen, like that 12 to 14.
We need to tell them about 11s.
Well, that's in there, but what is it? What'd you say?
You teach them all they need to know, the basic stuff before the age of 13, and then after 13, all you're doing is guiding.
Yeah. If you've been parenting all along through this path and you've been giving them pretty well, by the time they're in that 11, 12, 13 spot, you've pretty well given them everything you got. Now it comes down to they gotta take everything you've given them and apply it. And you're trying to keep them in the bumper guards. Just keep them between the lines until they graduate. Now, are you gonna be advising and helping and guiding and grounding and feeling some consequences in there? Absolutely. But the core of what you had to teach them about being right and wrong, putting on their clothes, getting themselves to care for self, you've given that to them. Now, the other thing about that is they're nuts. I mean, pretty well,
Diagnosable.
they're diagnosable during that time. Their hormones are starting to kick in. They have all these outside pressures on them. Life is just changing so rapidly, physically, emotionally, mentally, and this day and age, socially. And it just takes everything they got just to contain it all within them, and it usually doesn't go too well. It spills out everywhere.
So they're supposed to be nuts. They're supposed to be. So when you're like, I need to take you to the counselor, I need you to get you on medication, that means you have a normal child. You know, when they're behaving the way you think they should behave, they're developmentally delayed. That's a serious thing. It's like they can't talk or they can't walk. So be okay with them being out of control, emotional basket case, their brain, which should be working well, all of a sudden isn't working well at all. They come up with the craziest ideas. Well, they've got 2/3 of their brain just turned on. And they can actually get lost in their own head, and they do frequently. The real social parts of the brain have just come online. And that's why they can sit around and talk to their friends for hours about nothing. And they want to. That's like the most important thing in life. That's normal. But about that time also, parental influence drops to the basement. So this is one of the things that really scared me, because at the time I was first exposed to this research, I had a 13-year-old, 11-year-old, and 9-year-old. And the research indicates that after 12, the best a parent can hope for is to be about 10% of the influence upon their child. There's a lot of things they still need to learn. And the best you can hope for is 10%. And if you don't have good parenting skills and good communication skills and good relationship with your child, you may be a lot lower than 10%. Their teachers are much more of an influence than you are. Their peers are the #1 influence. Over 50% of what shapes a child after 13 is the opinions of their idiot friends, who
But
don't
he's
know
not
any more than they
opinionated
do.
about that at all.
Well, if they survive to adulthood, they can be retrained.
One of so that whole idea of someone else having an influence on your child. One of the greatest tools you have is this.
Yeah.
Surround your children with the kind of people that they will listen to besides you, that you trust, to give them just as much advice in exactly the same way you would want them to be given it. And you do that because you've instilled in them from birth, this is family. And you may be nothing, but mom's best friend's the coolest lady she knows. And so she'll go talk to her. No joke. Heather picked out a dress at the store. She picked, not grandma, she picked out this dress. And this is the dress. And grandma's like, are you sure? Which is usually the other way. Grandma was picking out things she's going, okay, well, I don't know where that thing. She picked out this dress, came home, first Sunday she put it on, one of her friends said, that's an odd color. all she said. But then it was like, well, I can't wear that dress now. I mean, cannot wear this dress. And I would say, it looks so cute on you. No, it doesn't. I mean, like, nothing I said. So, I went to my best friend and said, she's going to wear this dress on Sunday, and I really need you to tell her it's a great looking dress on her. Sunday, I made her, and of course it was like, she was stomping and throwing her little fit. She wore that dress to church, and all of my adult friends who have children her age all said, that is the cutest dress. Has so-and-so seen you in that dress? That is so cute. You're just, then I couldn't get her to not wear it on Sunday. That is a very simplistic example, but it made the impact that I needed. I needed to know my girl was going to listen to those other women who were godly, deeply godly women, and I could trust what they were going to tell her when she wouldn't listen to me.
So it's not totally up to you once they're teenagers.
Okay.
Yeah, we're over time, we've got to let you go. Next week, we're going to get into,
We'll finish the teen. Or do you want to hang on to the teen?
we'll come back to the teen later. We're going to talk about parenting strategies and parenting styles.
Yeah.
And kind of go back to this whole lifespan thing again from how do you parent at each of these stages. And then the next week, we're jumping into modern problems, so things most of us never had to deal with growing up that our poor kids have to deal with. And then the last week, we're going to get into teens really deep. What do you do with a 12-year-old to 18-year-old? And so that whole night's just focused on raising them to be able to watch them.
3 more classes.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for being here. Go parent well.